How'd you meet Paul Smoker?
I met him a really long time ago. His wife, Beverly, was starting to teach piano here, and they had a son named Evan. They still have a son named Evan. He was in 4th grade, and Paul and Beverly asked if I would like to teach him, and I said yes. So Evan was my private student from 4th grade through 12th grade. He learned all the percussion instruments, so I knew that side of the family. I remember Paul dropping him off for lessons, and now Evan is a world-class musician living in Portland. So I knew Paul first that way, and then he started teaching here at Nazareth. Now Nazareth University, it was Nazareth College, and he was for many years the director of our jazz program. And he had a huge impact on all of our students, all of our faculty, and he's one of the main reasons we have such a great jazz program today that is now run by his former student, Brad Batts. Yeah. So I got to work alongside of him here at school. I would be training the drummers, for instance, for his jazz ensemble. So I heard lots of stories about rehearsals and things, and certainly went to the concerts.
What was he? Talk to me about your time working with him as a colleague. You guys, you were here when he started, so his entire time overlapped with yours. So
right.
What was it? What was it like having Paul as a colleague?
Well, he was incredibly inspiring because I remember going to his recitals, which were extremely challenging in some ways. I mean, really stretched your ears because he could play in a very avant-garde style. He also knew a ton about jazz history, and so he would talk a lot about each composer, each piece and the background of that for his solo recitals and for the jazz ensemble. So it was like he's a jazz historian as well as a great player. I did get to play with him for some faculty recitals, and we played a little bit more inside because that would be more of my natural style of playing. And in 2011, I had some faculty over for dinner, and he was there, and I said, I think maybe I want to do my own jazz album. And I just looked at him and said, would you play on it? And he said, yes. And all of a sudden, bing, that was the seed that started my album, Kristen Sings and Plays and Rings. Because Paul said yes, I said, all right, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it soon. And I was blessed to have him in my band and be a very important part of that band, leading it artistically in some ways. And I also did a lot of prep. I'm the drummer and the singer and the mallet percussionist on the album. So I took lessons, like I really wanted to hone my chops on jazz vibes and drum set as well. So I did a little tutoring with him on the side.
Yeah. Well, what was it like? I mean, you talked about him being one of the artistic directors and one of the creative forces behind the album. And I want to talk with him, more about your experience with him at Nazareth. But, I mean, you talked about him being a jazz intellect and, such a creative player. What was it like having him in the recording sessions? What were those like as you were putting the album together?
Wow. Well, it was all live, which is very cool. So I would say I felt mostly empowered by just playing. I chose really great players that I could learn something from, and he was probably the main one, well, along with the pianist as well. And so I just felt empowered to try new things, to take risks, especially with improvisation, because I did a lot of drum improvisation. Within the group, I took drum solos, and I don't know, I just felt like I needed to really be present, because that's what you do when you're a true jazz musician. You're right in the moment because you're creating art right on the spot. It's not already planned out. And I also appreciated he actually dialed it down a little bit, and because he lives in a very avant-garde place for jazz, and he dialed it down just for me to kind of fit with the songs and the style that I was looking for. Yeah. Tunes I grew up playing and listening to and singing.
You talked a lot about that, that avant-garde side of things, and I've heard now from a bunch of musicians who talked about, learning improvisation from him, and obviously, you two were more of a colleague relationship as opposed to you being his student and him being your teacher. But You guys spent a lot of time in a classroom or a university together. I mean, what did you learn from him in your guys' time together?
I did, in talking with him personally about using a framework for jazz improvisation, I learned a lot about looking at a tune and the chord structure and what I now called a field of notes. So every set of chords has a field of notes that will work for that. So instead of thinking of playing over chord changes, I learned to think over those fields of notes, and I actually created my own like practice system of staying with, let's say, a field of notes that has 3 flats for 4 measures, and then I'm going to go to 2 sharps for the next, and then I would use a backing track and practice my scales along with those as my background. And he was a great proponent of course, a lot of practicing, but he said one thing I learned, and once you're done practicing, then you're just playing music, you put that away. But that greatly influenced my melodic playing on the vibraphone, I would say, and my understanding of how to play through changes and understand it. So that's something that stuck with me, and I passed it on to my students as well. That's
what I was going to just ask about too. Beyond that exercise, is there anything, either in terms of approach, though something tells me you don't share his language in the classroom, but what about his approach or some of the exercises that are still with you today with your students?
I would say just the first analyzing, like really studying, knowing the melody exactly the way it's sung, especially. Actually, I came upon that myself, is that when you sing a melody, if it has words, then you learn a lot more about the phrasing. So then you have to hear lots of different people play that melody, because if you just read it out of a fake book, it's very stilted sounding. And then I have my students, they have to study the chord progression, and I have them play the scale patterns that correspond with those first. But actually the first thing I try with my students is just to see how good listeners they are, because some of them can play by ear, because really your ear is the bottom line. If it sounds right, it is right, or whatever you create in the moment. It can often be wonderful. So I see how good their ears are first, and then I show them some of the tools of the theory, because some of them don't even need a lot of that, like so much analysis per se, but they can actually hear how to just improvise over the tune, for example, even a little better than I can in some cases.
Yeah. Did you share the bandstand with him? I mean, you talked about some of those recitals, but any like club gigs or anything sort of outside the recording studio or outside the college or university?
I didn't. Just that my CD release in 2011. Yeah, of course we shared the stage for that, and then I remember doing a faculty recital, because I think I have a cassette recording of that, where we did play together on a faculty recital. But most of his other gigs, I'd be watching him play with other musicians, like at the Bop Shop, for example.
I want to ask your opinion of him as a musician. We've touched upon some of this, and the colleague or the relationship you had with him as a colleague, or in the recording studio. What did you think when you listened to him? When you heard him play? What were some of your impressions of him as a musician? You can kind of take a back seat and listen and appreciate. What did you think of him?
I would say there are no holds barred. It's like exactly where he was, feeling and listening in the moment, is what he played. He has a lot of patience for silence. He also has a lot of endurance. If he has a musical idea, he will not stop that idea until he's done expressing it. Yeah. And the feel is always there. The underlying pulse and the groove is just so deeply set in his playing, no matter how many notes he's playing or not playing, or how outside the changes he's playing. And then in the end, the overall form and the arch of the form is always beautiful, even though the listener doesn't know where he's going yet in the middle of the song.
Yeah. One thing you said at the beginning, and I wanted to wait to touch on it, is there's no jazz program as it exists here without Paul. What about him as a teacher, as a person, made that happen here?
Well, first of all, he did succeed Timothy Sullivan, who had the jazz program prior to him. So since I've been here, we've had Tim Sullivan, Paul Smoker, and Brad Botts. So there was a jazz program in place, but he definitely took it. It it developed a big Paul Smoker flavor and influence over time since he's been here. So the level of first of all, the ability of the students to improvise, that level rose tremendously. And their curiosity and their just being willing to invest in jazz studies. I saw more and more people become interested and joining the jazz ensemble, and sometimes be even a little scared because the bar was set so high all the time. You know, they had to withstand, okay, no, this is not right. You've got to get on it. You've got to learn the tune better, or whatever he was saying to the group. No, you got to work on the groove more. We need more rehearsal time. He just set the bar high, but I think he inspired people to such a high level that we have many graduates now through several teachers that are out there playing great jazz, which is a testament.
How do you remember Paul?
As a deep soul, extremely unique, incredible musician, thinker, and a person I tremendously admire and love deeply.
I asked this about Brad too, because there are these series of shows coming up with Bop Shop Friday, Saturday, and the jam session on Sunday. You know, after about a decade now, or just under, you know, people are still celebrating the life of Paul Smoker. What do you think about this run of upcoming shows? So many of these names and people are coming together to celebrate him. What do you think?
I think it's completely appropriate. I'm so glad that we're doing this, that even though there are a few years have passed now, he's touched so many people's lives across the world, musicians, family, colleagues, and I think this is the perfect time. It's always the perfect time to get together. I'm so glad we have many people traveling to Rochester to play music.
Anything I didn't ask about that you'd like to
I
add?
want to just point out, I'm sitting in my office. I have a pile of CDs here, many of which are Paul Smoker CDs, where they're his actual CDs, with some with Phil Haynes, and then some. These are just dubs of, like, he loved Art Pepper, so I became a huge fan of Art Pepper. You know, listening to that style and that artist, for example.
Yes.
So that influenced me. And then I just wanted to show you a book that's really cool. Ron Netsky, who is has been head of our art department for many years, wrote this really cool book called Jazz Snapshots. And these are articles that he wrote for City Newspaper. And both Paul and I happen to be in the same book, which is really cool. Yeah. He's in the list of trumpeters and I'm in the list of drummers. And anyway, I'm very proud to be in the same book.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned the CDs, because Phil Haynes talked about the CDs.
Yep.
Michael McNeil talked about the CDs. Brad talked about the CDs.
Yep.
So Art Pepper is one of them, but any other CDs or cassettes or anything else that he burned for you while you two were colleagues? I
have piles of them. I'm not sure where they all are. I'm not sure what I have besides Art Pepper. Yeah. Oh, I have Stan Getz on there too. I grew up loving Stan Getz. So, yeah, they're all in my my listening repertoire.